Oh, here you go. Okay, got it.
All right, everybody, welcome back to SHREWSWORTHY. I'm your host, Ben Shrewsbury, as always. And joining me today, my friend who has been my friend for 2 years and just one of the, I call him the greatest thing Hollywood ever produced, because he probably is. Screenwriter, film historian, podcaster, author, producer. He's done a lot, and he's a podcaster now. And we've been doing it for a year and a half. I'm his producer. Steve, how are you, bud?
Great, Ben. It's always a pleasure to see you. You are one of the great podcast producers of all time, and a good human being, and the world's leading authority on wrestling sweat.
Well, I can't argue with that. Steve, thanks so much for being here. Obviously, this was one of my easier interviews to nail down. We talk about how hard an interview is to nail down. Sometimes I think you're the easiest, because all I have to do is call you and be like, are you okay with this? And you're just going to say, yeah, that's fine.
By the way, I should probably explain to anybody who's seeing this is that I'm standing in front of the poster art for the great 1967 World War II movie, The Dirty Dozen. And Lee Marvin is right above my head, firing a grease gun. You got Charles Bronson, Telly Savalas, Jim Brown, and a cute blonde in the middle, of course.
Of course. Wouldn't be a 60s movie without a blonde, would it?
Of course, of course.
But let's talk about the film industry a little bit. That's not the main reason you're here, obviously, but I do want to talk about it a little bit, because I don't think you can have a conversation with a film historian without talking about the industry at least a little bit. Where do you think we are right now historically? I think the movie theater business is in trouble, and it's becoming a luxury business, and it's becoming more and more expensive, which is part of the reason people aren't going, is because it's gotten so expensive.
Well, there's a couple of different businesses. There's the Marvel universe and the studio franchise business. Every studio has their franchises. I mean, obviously Disney has Star Wars and Pixar and Marvel. They almost have a monopoly on franchises, but Sony has their franchise, Paramount has the Transformers, Universal has their different franchises. These are the popular movies that people get out of their homes and visit, mostly young people. And the young people are the target audience for Hollywood, because they're the people who go to the movies the most. And I think that it's funny, because a lot of things haven't changed in 100 years. Young people like to go to the movies on dates. Right. And whether it's, whatever the occasion is that gets them out of the house, because they don't want to be sitting on their parents' couch watching a movie and holding hands. That doesn't quite work. So they want to go to the theater. So the theater business is still based entirely on sex. And of course, that's what's kept it alive for 100 years. Anybody over 40, though, is a different audience. And that audience has gone completely to streaming as their primary entertainment source. So to get them out of their homes, occasionally you'll get a Top Gun, that kind of a movie. I think Indiana Jones, the new one, will probably draw them out as well. But
I don't think that looks very good. I'm worried about that. How old is Harrison Ford?
Well, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I think he's nearing his expiration date in terms of action.
And how many times has he said he'll never do it again, and then they throw money at him and he does it again? I mean, the problem I have now with the theater business, and I've had this problem for a long time, is like you said, they're driven by sex, which they have been for 100 years. That's not new, but they're getting so expensive. The theater business has priced its own target market out in a lot of ways.
It's funny. Ticket prices have risen considerably, but I think that when you combine the ticket prices with the cost of a tub of popcorn and a drink, you're spending $25 at the movies. That is a lot of money. I think that, the other problem with the movie business is it's competing with so many other arenas now. I think that whether it's games or whether it's television
What we're doing.
or or podcasts. I mean, the thing is, young people today have so many choices. I was having this conversation recently with a friend of mine about the fact is that movies used to be, in fact, I was having a conversation last week with David Anson, the former film critic for Newsweek. It used to be that movies were the primary pop cultural source. I mean, it was the water cooler for everything. You know, you always talked about what new movies you were going to see. I love movies. Everything about me is about movies as an historian, as a writer, as a producer, as a podcaster. I have trouble finding something I want to see. You know, there's a lot of movies still being released every year, but not a lot of them that say, God, I can't wait to see that.
It's a shortening list. And I know this new animated Spider-Man from Sony is doing really well right now. I don't know if you've seen the numbers for that, but they're insane.
No, they're insane. And I think that you could say that animation is really keeping the movie business afloat in many ways, because those movies invariably make good money and they're timeless and they can run them again and again and again.
And they sell to everyone, adults, kids,
right.
grandparents, doesn't matter.
The family audience is not being served very well. And I think that the animation business, that primarily I'm interested because I've written 2 animated features, which I'm out there in the marketplace trying to sell. I wrote a picture based on a children's book I wrote with David Miller called The Cat Who Lived with Anne Frank. And that we've developed an animated feature about Mushi, who was a real cat that lived in that attic for 2 years in Amsterdam. In our little bit of fancifulness, he joins the Dutch animal resistance against the Nazis. However, in our movie, the Nazis are the German Shepherds, Rottweilers, and Dobermans that patrol the canals. So it's a little bit of a metaphor, but we're hopeful that we can get it moving. Our go-to lead will be Adam Sandler. We've had 2 meetings with Adam Sandler, and I think he's going to, I'm hoping he'll join us as our lead Mushi. So yeah, I've done that. And we've also written a movie about a robot hummingbird. That's, I think, kind of interesting. So animation has saved the business in many ways, but I think that even the studios now are beginning to think about their costs. You know, can every movie cost $200 million? I mean,
no,
these
it's not sustainable.
Yeah, it's not a stable business. So I think that will be interesting to monitor. I don't think movie theaters will go away, Ben, but I think that
they're a luxury business. That's what they are at this point.
It is a bit of a luxury business. I still think they have their purpose. As I said earlier, I think young people still want to go on dates to movies. But we old fogies, we've got a reason, need a reason for going.
And part of that is cost, which we've talked about ostensibly. And another thing I think that the problem kind of has become is, for movie theaters specifically, is televisions have gotten so good. And they've got 4K TVs available at Walmart for $200. Now, you know, movie theaters have 8K a lot of the time now, but the quality difference isn't there like it used to be. You kind of have to think, and I think that's a big part of it.
Well, television drama has really taken over. If you think about it, the dramatic motion pictures have been totally supplanted by superhero adventure films. And if you want to do a good drama, you're going to probably do it on television now. The other problem is, since I'm out there every day writing comedy, where have all the comedy features gone? Comedy has almost literally disappeared from the feature film marketplace, with a few exceptions every year. Usually there's a raunchy comedy coming out, including this new one from Jennifer Lawrence. She has a new comedy coming out.
She's kind of become the queen of raunchy comedy, hasn't she?
Well, she's certainly raunchy in this one for sure. So, you know,
but like, she's been doing raunchy comedy for 10 years. Like, right after she finished Hunger Games, she went and did raunchy comedy. Like, that's what she does now.
Well, she has her niche, and I think that family comedy of the ilk of a Ghostbusters or a Back to the Future or a Night at the Museum, those kinds of comedies have somewhat disappeared. So we're hopeful to add our voice to those kind of comedies.
When do you think was the firm turning point where they turned away from that family comedy, because I kind of point to the beginning of the 2010s was when those kind of started to slip out.
It's a
And
good question. You know, you think about comedy voices. Woody Allen obviously is in the doghouse forever now. Albert Brooks went away from comedy, has been doing drama. Steve Martin and Martin Short are doing their road show. They're not doing features as much, although they do that television series, Only Murders in the Building.
Eddie Murphy retired at his peak.
Eddie Murphy pretty much, well, he's still around, but not doing as much comedy. I think, I'm thinking of the guy who does all those comedies. Anyway, a lot of the people who do comedies haven't been doing as much comedy. There's also a feeling, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but it's said that American comedy does not translate in foreign audiences. So that may be an issue too, since according to the latest statistics, more than half the money that movies make around the world come from around the world, not the US market. So, but it hasn't deterred us from writing, and we think we've got some good physical comedy that doesn't rely as much on American idioms.
Well, the other thing is, for as much as we talk about the theater business in America going the way that it is, which is, 2 years ago, you could have told me that there'd be not that many theaters left in the country after the pandemic, and I probably would have believed you. Just, I don't know, and you remember this probably better than I do. When the pandemic happened, there was a legitimate fear that AMC was gone, and that was it. And
yeah, no, I mean, everything was, I think the whole business, it was the day the earth stood still. I mean, basically, the movies just stopped and people weren't going out. We all just kind of retreated to our homes and watched our streamers. I think it was really the birth of the streaming craze because everyone was trying to get something on their home screens.
that started in 2016, 2017, but it really popped in 20 when
Oh yeah,
on March 11th when the world shut down and everything kind of stopped. I mean, you don't, and for all intents and purposes, the movie theater business should have been dead right then and there. I mean, historically, like if you look back on that in 50 years and the movie theater business is still alive, you're going to think, how the hell did they survive that?
well, I think Top Gun had part of that. I think once Top Gun was released at the tail end, and as we came back from the COVID, I think it got people going to the theater again. I think that the problem with the streamers is they've got to find a business plan that makes sense for them because they have much too much programming, and a lot of it gets lost in the shuffle. I worked at Showtime for 10 years, and we had too much programming, and we didn't have enough marketing dollars to support it all. Whereas HBO had less programming, but it was a Tiffany network. A lot of their stuff got a lot of attention media-wise. So I think with the streamers today, I think they've got to cut back on the number of things they do. You don't need 100 television shows. You need 10 good ones that people remember, and then they'll pay their monthly for that. I kept Netflix the last 3 years because I like Stranger Things. I kept Paramount Network because I like Yellowstone.
That's a fantastic show.
Fantastic show. Yeah, and the prequels have been great too. 1923 and 1883 they're just great. I think
that's keeping Paramount's network alive.
Oh yeah,
to a greater extent.
Very much so. Very much.
I mean, what else does Paramount have right now? Because they don't have that big money thing anymore. They had, people will say, oh, NCIS kept them alive forever, and it did. And then Criminal Minds came along and helped. But Yellowstone is what's making them their money now because they don't have these crime dramas to bail them out anymore.
It'll be interesting to see how Yellowstone survives without Kevin Costner, because the rumor is that he's gone and that he's off making 4 Westerns in the next 2 years, and that's his priority.
I don't think that show can survive without Kevin Costner.
Well, I hope you're right, because I hope you're not right, but I hope I understand what you're saying. I think that there's talk of let's see, who was it? Who's the Texas actor?
McConaughey.
Yeah, there's talk of McConaughey taking root in the show. I'm not sure in what kind of role, But it would be sad to see Costner gone because he is the anchor of that show.
I mean, think about how much he's doing on that show. I mean, he is, for all intents and purposes, you know, from everything we've read, he's been writing a lot of the episodes. He's not just acting in this, he's directing and writing, and he's doing 15 different things. And I don't know if people realize this, but when a guy that does all of that stuff goes away, you can't replace that with one guy. This guy's doing 15 different people's jobs. Like,
well, I haven't heard any of this. You know, for all I know, Taylor Sheridan was the force of that show.
well, yeah, Taylor Sheridan. If Taylor Sheridan left, that show wouldn't happen. But it's Taylor Sheridan, and then Costner was right there with him. And you know, when a guy who does, you know, 15 different people's jobs leaves, I don't think you can just replace that with a Matthew McConaughey. For as great as I think McConaughey is, and I think McConaughey is fantastic, but I don't know how he'll.
I hear you.
I don't think he'll do well on TV because he is one of those more suited to film guys. Because if you think about what McConaughey's done, has he been in any great television shows? And it's a very different business. Television's a very different business from the film business. You know that.
Yeah, but although I have to say that actors are moving into TV in droves now, because how many actors don't feel like putting on the cape? You know, the only way to get a good dramatic role is going to be on streaming.
I mean, James Spader left movies to do The Blacklist, right?
Right, and hasn't left. I mean, he's very happy in that, although I think Blacklist is finally done.
Blacklist is ending. But he said this a whole bunch of years ago, and I don't know if this is true. And if this is true, I think that's a bad thing for Hollywood. He said that after The Blacklist, he's probably done, period, which I hope isn't true, because that's a loss right there of a great.
Speaking of losses, we lost an actor this week who died in a motorcycle crash. I don't know if you heard about Treat Williams.
No, I did not.
Yeah, Treat Williams was killed in a motorcycle crash in Vermont near his home. And I remember Treat going all the way back to Prince of the City and Hair and 1941. And in fact, in his obit today, I was reading in the LA Times, it listed him as being in The Empire Strikes Back. And I had no idea he was in The Empire Strikes Back.
Well, neither did I.
That was crazy. I got to look that up in the credit situation.
Now, let's talk about Saturday Night at the Movies for a minute. I think me and you could sit here and talk about the film business for 7 hours, and we probably have before, and we probably will again. When I say me and Steve could sit here and talk about the business forever, we probably could. Saturday Night at the Movies. This podcast has a weird story to it, by all intents and purposes. How this whole thing started and then how we got where we are is like a really weird, like, amalgamation of stuff. But we're about to record our 75th episode tomorrow as we're recording this. This won't go out for a couple of weeks, but tomorrow we're recording our 75th episode. I can't believe we're on 75 already. That's insane to me.
It's crazy. And I have to tell you that this podcast has restored my really true love of movies. You know, I started my career writing for a magazine in Chicago called Cine Fantastique, covering science fiction, fantasy, and horror movies. And I was kind of a forensic historian. I would go find the people who made the classics, interview them at length, and really learn piece by piece how they made these films. And the podcast and tracking down people and doing the same thing again and presenting it as an audio entertainment has been so much fun for me, just a lot of fun. And I can't thank you enough for all the help you've given me to make this possible.
And it's weird because in the same way that this podcast has restored your love for the film business, and I've never told you this, there was a period right as we kind of hit the 25-30 mark where I was pretty much ready to be done with all of it. And it was a conversation me and you had. I can't even remember exactly what you said, but you said something to the effect of, we aren't done, keep it moving. And we've just kept moving ever since. So there are times where I'll get low and think, well, this is all pointless. And then I'll remember, wait a second.
Well, the nice thing about this podcast is we have access to so many interesting people in all facets of show business. And I think that I think people are interested in how things are put together. And I've been doing interviews for 50 years, and I really enjoy the process. And it's constantly churning. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of history out there that needs to be told and preserved. And the other thing about my podcast is it is a preservation tool. We are preserving conversations with people whose lives were very interesting and key to the business.
And my favorite example of that preservation thing is the Alfred Hitchcock interview that we managed to pull from the legitimate grave, because when we got our hands on that, that thing was gone. And I messaged you when you sent that to me, and I said, uh-oh. You remember my exact, you could probably find it in the messages between us. All I said was, oh no, because I didn't think we were going to be able to save it. And I called you, I think a couple days later, and I was like, Steve, I don't know, man. We're in a little bit of trouble here, because if we can save this, we're miracle workers, but I don't know. And there was a moment when I told you that we saved it, and I'll never forget, we were on a Zoom, you had your camera on, and your eyes just lit up. You were like, you did what?
No, that interview, which I did in 1976, turned out to be really a lot of fun.
By the way, I still don't know how we managed to save that, because that thing was so far gone.
Oh boy. Well, audio magic, that's for sure.
The digital age is a sheer miracle, and don't ever doubt it. Now,
by the way, the American Film Institute has sent me a higher quality copy of the Albert R. Broccoli interview, now with hopefully better audio. So I'm going to be listening to that, and if that works, we'll feature it in an upcoming episode.
well, if it needs more work, clearly I can do it. So
Terrific.
if I can save that Hitchcock episode, I can do just about anything, I'm convinced. Going back to talking about Saturday Night at the Movies, I really do love this show. I love working on this show. It's so fun. All the interviews are really fun. One thing I really enjoy is these repeat guests that you have, your friends that pop up here and there that are repeats,
Sure.
but they're there every 10 to 15 episodes. I think you have something really special in the fact that you've been in this business for what, 40 years?
Let's see, this is the 50th year.
Oh man, I'm 10 years off. I look like a jerk. Anyway,
I did my first interview in the fall of 1973.
wow.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, how have you hung on that long? How many times have you pulled your hair out?
I have fun. I mean, I'm doing a lot of writing. The books are very satisfying. The podcast is a lot of fun. I bang my head against the wall a lot about, people's refusal to read screenplays from relatively unknown writers, but it doesn't stop me from writing. And, the podcast is just my conduit for so much energy that it's also going to hopefully lead me to more hosting work as a video host. I want to be kind of like those guys on Turner Classic Movies who host the movies. I want to be able to impart some of my knowledge in video as well.
And I want to impart this. Steve doesn't do a lot of interviews, so for him to agree to come on here and do this is crazy to me. Because you don't do a lot of interviews. Am I correct in that? You don't?
Well, if I'm promoting a book that's about to go into print, yes. When the 4th edition of the James Bond movie encyclopedia came out in early 21, I did about 40 podcast interviews. So
is there going to be another run of that at some point? Or is
in 10 years, I'll revisit it. But I think the current book, which goes up through No Time to Die, is fine for the next 10 years. And, I'll revisit it. But I think the Bond encyclopedia is pretty complete right now.
Do you think that there will be another Bond at some point? Because there's been talk that there will be, talk that there won't be. They're done. No, they're not. They don't
James
know.
Bond is like death and taxes, man. There will always be James Bond.
And
If they ever let those rights drop, I'm going after them. I think, but the chances of the rights dropping are literally zero. Amazon bought MGM, which includes the James Bond series, half of it, because they own it with Eon Productions. That's Broccoli's daughter and his stepson, Michael Wilson. There will always be Bond movies. Bond has not hurt itself with lousy productions like some of the DC and some of the Marvel thing. Well, the Marvel, not so much Marvel, but some of the DC properties kind of fell flat. But Bond will always be with us. I predict we'll be watching, I may not be watching them, but Bond will be watching into the 22nd century and beyond.
I've had the opinion for a long time, and I have this opinion of a lot of these big franchises, Bond, Marvel, DC, you name it. And Marvel, sales-wise, has kind of gotten into that Bond territory. They're not there yet, but they're getting there in terms of sales numbers. Because
well, actually, to be honest, I think Marvel has surpassed Bond. I think Bond's international grosses have been terrific. The last one didn't do as well because it was affected by COVID, but I think the box office grosses on the Avengers movies and the Spider-Man movies have been off the charts. I think that Bond still trails the latest Marvel movies in terms of box office, but Bond is a big franchise, and I think Amazon realizes that, and they want a Bond movie sooner than later. But first of all, we've got to find a guy to play James Bond.
And that could be the most difficult thing here with Daniel Craig essentially saying, thanks, but no thanks, I'm done.
Oh yeah, and think about it though, when Daniel Craig came aboard in 2006, which is quietly 17 years ago, he was an unknown. Nobody knew who Daniel Craig was. He was literally an unknown. And I predict if they're smart, I think the new Bond will probably be cut from an unknown rank. He won't be a big name. And I think that will help the series.
But correct me if I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong about this, just completely call me an idiot. They wanted to keep him beyond No Time to Die, but they couldn't.
Well, if you think about it, though, Daniel Craig now is, I think he's 53. When you reach 50, it's time to hang up the James Bond shield. Now, you and I were just talking about Indiana Jones. You know, Harrison Ford is, if I'm not mistaken, approaching 80, if not already 80. And he's still doing Indy. I mean, Stallone, I think if Stallone had an opportunity to put on the trunks and play Rocky again, he'd do it too.
I mean, he's playing a mobster for Paramount in a not very good show.
Tulsa King. Yeah, no, I haven't watched it yet.
I don't. Oh, do you value your time at all? That's my only question to you. But I think it would have been, I have not seen the latest James Bond, full transparency here. I have heard that they gave him a pretty good send-off in terms of for how long he was there and all that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they pull somebody from the, like you said, Daniel Craig cloth of virtually unknown.
I think, well, remember, at the heart of James Bond is a secret agent. You know, Roger Moore was able to make the series work for him back in the 70s because he was so charming, but he was hardly a secret agent. I mean, he does things in that series which are downright comical, but he got away with it because it's Roger. I think they're going to go. First of all, the Roger movies were part of the 70s and early 80s. It's a different time. Today, you couldn't do a comic Bond. It's just not going to happen. You have to be gritty and serious, and that's what the Daniel Craig films delivered, and they were fabulously successful.
Do you think, much like I think with Marvel, do you think Bond would benefit from a bit of a hiatus period? Not an extended period away, but just a little bit of, we're going to go away and work on this for a while and come back.
Well, just by the nature of the beast, I think you're going to have a hiatus because it's probably going to be 2 or 3 years before you're going to see the next James Bond movie. because it's not going to be a little picture. It'll be a big picture with a lot of special effects. And so it's probably not going to come out in 24. We're probably talking 25 at the earliest, unless they come up with something quickly. And I just don't think you rush a James Bond movie. I think you've really got to think about it. And I think they'll be doing a lot of thinking about it. You know, Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson, there's talk about them maybe giving up the series to new producers, although I just don't think that's going to happen. I think that they want to keep the legacy for the family. So not sure.
Do you think, because I used to feel the same way you did about the Marvel franchise before they overdid it, because people forget that early Marvel, when they started this with RDJ back with Iron Man, these used to be not jammed down your throat every 6 months. These used to be.
I think that I think, boy, I'll tell you, I think that you can't just be throwing new movies at people every 3 months. Although again, I'm not in that core target. If I'm 12 to 24 and I know a new Marvel picture is coming down every 3 months, I'm happy.
I mean, I'm in the core target. You know what I mean? And I'm done with it. I was done after Endgame. I jumped out. Okay, I'll watch the new Spider-Man movies simply because I really like Tom Holland. And I think Tom Holland is brilliant, and I think Zendaya is brilliant. But, you know, and we've talked about this before, me and you, going back to the film business a little bit, because I'll be honest, it's the main reason I had you on here, because I wanted somebody who I could talk about the film business with. And you're not going to argue with a chance to talk about the film business for half an hour, are you?
No, absolutely not.
But the thing I've noticed, and you can tell me if this has always been a thing, people seem to be hitching their wagons more to actors and actresses now than franchises.
No, I don't think so. I think that it's the franchises that the key. Bond is bigger than one guy.
Well, I agree with you on, there's certain exceptions, obviously, but like
Spider-Man was bigger than one guy. I mean, they left Tobey Maguire behind. I mean, the thing is,
they did him dirty.
I don't think people go to the movies for the actors anymore. I think they go to the movies for the concept or the intellectual property. You know, if it's a Marvel movie, I don't think the kids care who's in it as long as it's good. Do we have movie stars anymore? Who's a movie star today? I mean, Leo DiCaprio, yes. Brad Pitt, yes. The Rock, yes. There's not that many. I think Will Smith used to be a movie star. Now he's just a guy who slaps people.
What do you think happens with him? I haven't really, me and you talked about this a little bit when it happened, but what do you think happens with Will Smith now? Is he done?
No, he's not done. I mean, Will Smith made a bad decision. And I think he did not like his wife insulted. And I don't think Chris Rock, was trying to really be that insulting. I think he's a comic. Sometimes he says things off color, whatever. And Will Smith didn't like what he said. So that's what happened. And Will Smith is a terrific actor. And Will Smith, I believe, is a good guy. Everybody snaps once in a while, and he happened to snap. So you will be hearing from Will Smith, although unfortunately it hurt his latest film, which nobody went to see, about the slave in during the Civil War, the title of which escapes me. That
didn't review well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I didn't hear much about it at all, although I heard it was very harrowing.
So talking more about the film business here, where do you see us going in the next 5 years? Because if Marvel doesn't take a break, which I have a hard time believing they won't, even if it's not right now, at some point in the next 5 years, I think they will, because I think Kevin Feige is about to get fired.
Well, I think that the Marvel universe keeps expanding. They've got hundreds of characters they can turn into movies. The Disney people want to make money. They want to pump out those movies. I think there's going to be more consolidation. One of the big streaming services, whether it's Apple or Amazon, is probably going to acquire a studio. It could be Sony, it could be Paramount. I don't know. I think that prices are going to come down. I think, as we talked about, every movie can't cost $200 million. They're going to figure out a way to do things less expensively. This is a very vibrant and organic business. As much trouble as there is, and there's a lot of trouble with a strike right now. I mean, I'm technically on strike as a writer. The actors may go on strike at the end of the month. We'll see what happens. I'm not sure the business model is designed to take care of everybody. As I was trying to explain today with one of my friends, when a Marvel movie does, let's say, $1 billion at the box office, there's some serious profit there, which means that it could trickle down into the actors or the directors or the writers' pockets. So there is something of a back end. In the streaming world, whether or not a movie is watched by 2 people or 2 million people, the people who pay their monthly fees to get that service still pay the same fee. Their fee is not going to go up because the movie's seen by 12 million people. So I'm not sure where the revenue stream comes to accommodate everybody who has their hand out. I don't know. I don't know what the business, I don't even think the streamers know what the business model is, but they've got to take care of the writers and they've got to take care of the actors. And, if they're going to run a movie 75 times in a month, they should compensate the writers in some way, or at least at the end of production, give them a bonus of what they probably would receive somewhat as a back end to a typical movie. Although I don't even know if that'll ever happen. You never hear any largesse on the part of companies taking care of people. It's usually, how do we avoid taking care of people?
Well, that's the whole thing, right? I don't think this Screenwriters Guild strike is anywhere near over. I think this is going to.
They're not even sitting down at the table. I mean, there's nothing going on now. If the writers strike, they'll strike July 1st. If the writers are out July 1st, if the actors are out July 1st, then the whole business shuts down, and that's when I think they'll come back to the table fairly rapidly.
I read something today that said the writers want to go to the table, but the business doesn't. Is that accurate to your knowledge, or is that total crap?
I think the studios are waiting, or the streamers and studios are waiting to see what the actors do, because if the actors go out, I think it's gonna mean more. I don't know. I'm not privy to the conversation, but there's no negotiations going on right now. People are far apart. They said that the writers wanted a total of $489 million in terms of terms of increases, and the producing entities would offer them 89 million. So there's a major gap. Yeah, that's a big gap.
Now, so often in these negotiations, everybody will start on their extremes. Writers Guild will start on a high extreme, studios will start on a low, and they'll meet somewhere in the middle. That's usually what happens in these union negotiations in any business, not just the film business. But this writers' strike feels a little different to me in terms of.
Some people feel it's existential. If they don't get a good piece of the streaming, it's really tough. And there are other issues on the table too. The amount of writers in writers' rooms, whether the thing that's worrying some writers, which I'm not really one of them, is this whole AI thing. If the studios start hiring robots to write screenplays, what's that do with writer careers? But I think the possibility of a robot writing a viable commercial screenplay, I think, is very remote. Now, I may be proved wrong.
We're way off that. That's not going to happen. If any of you writers that are on strike are watching this, AI is not taking your jobs anytime soon. Not in your lifetime, okay? Any of you that are alive that are in the guild now, you don't have to worry about that. Your grandkids, on the other hand, maybe. But no. Like, by the time this next deal is up, it still won't be a concern. So don't even think about that. But what they do need to think about, and me and you've been screaming this from the rooftops, is this revenue needs to get split more evenly. And that's been the case for 60 years, probably, as long as you've been in the business, at least.
No, of course. It happens every few years. The last major negotiation was over DVD and Blu-ray pieces of the action. Before that, it was television. I mean, yeah, Yeah,
And
I mean,
streamers do know how the revenue works. They just don't tell you because they don't have to, because most of them are private companies.
well, yes, and that's another good point, because in the old days, if you wanted to know how well a movie was doing, there were box office receipts and charts in the trade papers. And even when home video was king, when people were buying VHSs or DVDs, they had records of how many DVDs would sell. These days, streamers don't report anything. You don't
I
have no
think
idea, no idea. I mean, occasionally they say it got 6 million downloads. Again, I think that, how does this translate into back end scratch? I don't know.
Netflix is working on a new system, because Netflix has been the one streamer that has kind of come out and said, dude, we don't want the writers to strike. We're willing to fix this. They're the one streamer that has kind of come out and said, whoa, 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 whoa. Can we talk about this? And by the way, this is not me defending Netflix. I have plenty of problems with Netflix and the way that they do business, but they are the one streamer, somewhat to their credit, that has come out and said, whoa, okay, can we all calm down and just talk here? And of course, everybody else is screaming around them, and Netflix is like, guys, can we can we have a oh, no, okay, I'm gonna go over here. But I think what Netflix specifically is going to have to do is they're going to have to start making viewership numbers public. I don't see another way around this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to have to start splitting the revenue based on viewership numbers. That's the only way they can do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see another way, that unless they make viewership numbers, that's what they're going to have to do, Netflix specifically, because they're the big one?
See, I just don't know how you translate viewership numbers into a revenue stream. I just don't understand the model, because basically, you and I pay a monthly fee to get Netflix. I think I pay $18 or $19, whatever. I just don't know exactly what, because you're going to get the revenue stream for Netflix is from that monthly. Now, they've got 150 million subscribers. They're making $2 billion a month in revenue. Obviously, they've got revenue. I'm just not sure how it trickles down. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is based on viewers. If 9 billion people watch the newest Chris Hemsworth thriller, maybe the writer of that newest Chris Hemsworth thriller deserves a nice little fat bonus, as opposed to the guy who wrote an idiosyncratic story of his transsexual grandmother, which 3 people watched. Maybe he doesn't get the same bonus.
And that might be what it is. I don't know. And again, me and you aren't privy to the conversations going on right now. I think this strike is bigger than this strike. I think this has been a buildup of the last 15 years, and very quietly, probably the last 30. And what's interesting is, I feel like the last time this kind of strike happened, a deal was made, but there was really no happy resolution to it.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what they say. I think the writers got a little piece of something, but it wasn't that much. And the times have changed. I think that I'm not quite sure where things are going, but I could say fairly assuredly that we will have a movie business 50 years from now.
well, yeah, we will.
I'm not sure as many writers will be writing for it, but
What will it look like is kind of more the question. I mean,
yeah, I think there'll be good programming. I think people still want to see good movies. I certainly do.
I mean, who doesn't? What's interesting to me is we've gotten so far away from what got the business here. And I don't know. And you know what? Maybe, and you'd probably agree with me on this, maybe they need to go back to the drawing board on their business model, some of these places. And I think the theater business definitely needs to go back to the drawing board.
No, I think so. I think that there's a lot of changes going on. but at its core, it's still about telling stories that people want to see and hear. And I think Hollywood has always been good at that. It's just we need more variety of programming and more voices in different quadrants. Now, I get the diversity, that's a given, but just in terms of stories, more comedy, maybe some more Westerns, more adventure films, and certainly more family programming that you can take the whole family to.
I agree with you. I know we're running out of time, but I do want to thank you for this because I think this has been a really good conversation. I do want to have you back at some point, somewhere down the road.
Absolutely. And I'm very impressed with the fact that you know so much about the business being so young.
I mean, I work with you. I have to. I don't think I could work next to you in the way that I do and not know what I know. I mean, I don't think that would work. I think you'd have fired me. Okay, maybe not fired me, but looked at me like, the hell are you talking about? But I want to thank Steve Rubin, obviously, for being here today. I want to thank our producer, Damon Marvin. I want to thank Loch 22 as always. Next week, I'm trying to remember who's here next week. I'll put it out on Twitter. I don't remember who's here next week, but because I haven't recorded it yet. And we are going to wrap it up here, but thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Loch 22. We will be right back here next week. Thanks for watching, everybody.